Hi, I'm Debbie Brown, and today I'm going to teach you to quilt some free motion hearts on a crate quilt for the animal shelter. I'm teaching a series of machine quilting videos using crate quilts, which measure 14 by 20 inches and are made with 2.5-inch squares, 7 across and 10 down. I'm making them from scraps, but I'm also, for the videos, making them from 2 shades of gray so that you can see the stitching better. You can make yours any way you like, with a solid piece of fabric, or with scrap 2.5-inch squares, or a jelly roll, or anything like that. I like using the 2.5-inch squares because it gives me markings, and I've used the markings, the seam lines, to guide my stitching so far, and we're going to do that again today. So I've prepared a sandwich of fabric, and I have a layer of cotton fabric on the back. I have Quilter's Dream green batting on the inside, and if you're paying close attention, you'll see that it's sewn together in places. I use my scrap batting for this. I'm sure the shelter animals won't mind in the least. And then I have my checkerboard pieced fabric for the top. This is a completely free motion pattern today, so I've put on my open toe free motion quilting foot, and we're going to stitch hearts, 1 heart in each square over the whole quilt. So you can just do this as a simple border on your quilt. I'm doing this in one direction over the entire crate quilt, but you can use this in various ways. Every 2 squares are going to have a row of hearts on them. For hearts, I'm going to use Fabulux in the Pinks thread, and that is going to be for the top. It's 3 different shades of pink. In the bobbin, I'm going to use Deco Bob because it's thinner and I won't have to worry about changing my bobbin. So it's a matching polyester thread from Wonderfill. I'm going to put on my bands. They're going to help me move my fabric better. Now, on this quilt, I have 3 to 5 inches of backing and batting around the quilt. On a real quilt, I would leave more batting and more backing because I want to be able to have an entire hand width of fabric, of batting and backing all the way around my quilt so that I have something to grab onto when I'm quilting my edges. This project is a little bit short on extra fabric, but you'll see how important it is to be able to have your hand on the quilt where it naturally falls rather than within that little 1/2 inch extra of batting and backing you've left yourself. So let me roll up my extra fabric here, and I'm going to start on the outer edge. I'm going to make a knot in the batting, so it doesn't really matter how pretty the knot is. That's going to be stitched into the binding area. So needle down, needle up, pull up that bobbin thread, and tuck it inside my open toe foot. Loosen the tension a little bit on here, and I'll take a couple stitches. I'm going to stitch down 1/4 inch inside of that first seam, and I'm ready to start. My hearts are all going to face the top of the quilt, so I'm going to have one facing the top but a little bit to the side, going into this left square and then also going into the right square. So I'm going to come out, and you can see right here I'd like to place my hand here, but only half of it is on the quilt. So if I had a little more backing and batting, I'd have more to grab onto. But I can make this work for today. So I'm going to stitch in. And with free motion quilting, it's important to know where to go, but it's also important to know where to stop. Anytime I hit a corner or I'm going to change directions, that's a great place to take my foot off the pedal. Because if I stitch over and get a little jog, it'll hide itself there naturally. So I'm going to come around and make a heart on the left side, and I can stop in the point there. I'm going to now stitch back up and make it match on the right side. These aren't going to be perfect hearts, and I'm completely fine with that. Now I'm going to stitch down and make a loop around my seam intersection. And where my stitches overlap, I'm going to stop and be able to breathe, plan my next stitching, and continue on. I have a variable height foot on my machine. So I'm actually raising the foot a little bit just because it was getting caught on the seam, on the corners, the seams in that 4-point join. So let me stitch over to the block on the right and stitch another half of a heart and the rest of the heart. So let's see where I'm going to go next. I'm going to stitch down around that 4-patch intersection and put a heart to the left. And here we go. I'm being careful not to stitch these hearts too close to the binding area of my quilt. I don't want to bind off the tips of my hearts. Come down around that 4-patch and stitch another heart. And another. Around the intersection. And stitch the last heart. I'm going to continue stitching off of the quilt into the binding down through the seam between the 2 squares. And I can make a little overstitch knot here, lift up my needle, pull the quilt away and back, needle down, needle up, and it will pull up the bobbin thread. I'll cut everything all at once. Let's take a look and see how this turned out. I'm really pleased with how that turned out. So I'm going to make a matching line of, a matching vine of hearts going down all 5 sections of 2 squares across my crate quilt. I'll show you when I'm done. I've finished stitching my 5 rows of hearts, and on here you can see there are 5 distinct lines of hearts. If I was going for an edge-to-edge design on here, I didn't quite hit it, but that's not what I was going for. I like the vines of the hearts with them coming off. If I were going to put this on a quilt, I might put it in a border. If I have a 4-inch border, I might draw in all of those 2-inch squares so that I can evenly distribute my hearts going down. Quilting isn't so intimidating when you break it down into individual shapes and knowing exactly where you're going to place them. So I like to work within different squares or different markings on my quilts, and that's what I did today. I hope you take the opportunity to practice this design on a crate quilt, a charity quilt, or another quilt you might already have at home. Watching quilt videos can be very helpful, but nothing is going to replace the time spent with your hands on the fabric, moving it under the sewing machine. If you enjoyed this video, please visit DebbieBrownQuilts.com and sign up for my newsletter, where I will send more quilty goodness right to your inbox. While you're at DebbieBrownQuilts.com, you can also find some of the threads and supplies used in today's video. Please also take a moment and follow my YouTube channel so you don't miss any of my tutorials. Thanks for visiting today. Happy quilting!